Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a machine so out there, so complex, that for decades people were convinced it was pure science fiction.
Let me ask you something. What do you think is the single most important machine ever built? The one that's had the biggest impact on our world. Well, I'm willing to bet it's one you've probably never even heard of, and it operates on a scale that's, well, it's just mind-bending.
Okay, let's start with the price tag. A single one of these things costs a cool $400 million. Yeah, that's more than a super yacht. A lot more.
And inside? Well, inside its core, it's creating these tiny little explosions that make plasma reaching 220,000 Kelvin. To put that in perspective, that's nearly 40 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Just insane. And the precision? We're talking about an accuracy of just 5 atoms. 5! You know what that's like? It's like standing here on Earth, pointing a laser at the moon, and not just hitting a dime, but hitting a specific side of that dime. It's almost impossible to even wrap your head around.
Okay, so the big question is, why? Why on earth would anyone need to build something so ridiculously extreme? Well, the answer comes down to a really famous law in the world of computers, a law that was just about to be broken.
You see, for about 50 years, the entire tech world ran on this one simple observation from Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel. Everything, from the phone in your pocket to the biggest supercomputers, it was all powered by this idea. It was literally the engine driving all of our progress. And the logic behind it was super simple, right? The smaller you can make the transistors on a chip, the faster and more powerful that chip becomes. And this constant shrinking just drove innovation for decades. But by around 2015, we were about to hit a brick wall, a real fundamental limit of physics. Moore's law was basically done. So to keep things moving, to push past that wall, the entire industry had to make a massive bet. A bet on an idea that was so wild, so difficult, it honestly sounded like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. See, the way we make computer chips is a process called photolithography. The easiest way to think about it is like developing a photograph, but on an insanely microscopic scale. You're basically using a light to print these incredibly complex circuit patterns onto a silicon wafer.
But here's where they ran into trouble. As you try to print smaller and smaller lines for those circuits, the light waves you're using, well, they're just too big. They start to get blurry. It's kind of like trying to paint a tiny, detailed miniature figure with a giant house painting brush. It just doesn't work. So the only way forward? You had to use light with a way, way shorter wavelength.
And this is where this brilliant and frankly kind of absurd idea comes in. A Japanese scientist named Hiro Kinoshita proposed using something called extreme ultraviolet light, or EUV. So what's the problem? Well, EUV is basically a soft X-ray, and it gets absorbed by literally everything. Glass lenses? Nope, absorbs it. The air in the room? Gone. It was a complete physics nightmare. You'd have to build the whole machine to operate in a perfect vacuum, and you couldn't use a single lens.
So this seemingly impossible list of problems, it kicked off one of the longest, most difficult engineering quests in human history. We're talking about a 30-year struggle just to fight against the basic laws of physics.
And the first people who worked on this weren't celebrated as heroes. They were ridiculed. A scientist named Andy Haralick, when he presented his early research on this stuff, he said he was literally laughed off the stage. The rest of the scientific community just thought the whole idea was a joke, that it was fundamentally impossible.
And the road to making this thing a reality was just so long and so hard. Kinoshita's first successful image back in '86, people called it a fish story. They just didn't believe it. Then, a decade later, the US government cut all the funding, saying it was just too hard. And even when they finally got a prototype working in 2000, it was 10 times too slow to actually be useful for anything. It was just this marathon of failure after failure, with these tiny little bits of progress in between. So even with a working prototype, they were completely stuck. The problem was the light source. To be useful in a real factory, the machine needed a light that was hundreds of times more powerful. What they had, it just wasn't even close to being bright enough.
And the solution to this light problem? It sounds completely insane. The engineers figured out they had to create and perfectly control 50,000 tiny sun-hot explosions every single second.
Okay, so this is the absolute heart of the machine. Get this, a generator shoots out these tiny little droplets of molten tin. Each one is about the size of a white blood cell. And then a super high-powered laser has to zap each one perfectly 50,000 times a second. That zap vaporizes the tin into a plasma, and that's what creates the EUV light they need. And here's the kicker, they can't miss, not even once.
But you know what? Even just hitting the droplet wasn't good enough. The real breakthrough, the aha moment, came when they decided to hit it twice. First, a small pre-pulse laser zaps the droplet and it flattens it out like a little pancake. Then, a split second later, the huge main pulse laser comes in and vaporizes that pancake. And for whatever reason, that two-step process created a way more efficient, way more powerful burst of light. The level of precision this requires is just staggering. One of the engineers who worked on it had the best analogy. He said it's like shooting golf balls through a tornado and landing them in the hole every time. I mean, it's an engineering feat that's just on another level. It's almost impossible to even comprehend.
So, after 30 long years of struggle, after all those failures and all that ridicule, what did this quest against the impossible finally give us?
It gave us this, the ASML EUV lithography machine. There's only one company on the entire planet that can build these things, a Dutch company called ASML. And this machine, it's the reason Moore's Law didn't die. Every single advanced microchip in your phone, your computer, your car, it was made using one of these. Oh, and to ship just one machine, it takes 250 shipping containers and seven Boeing 747s. It's that massive.
You know, the whole story of this machine is just such a powerful reminder of that old saying. If the pioneers of EUV had been reasonable people, they would have given up. They would have listened when everyone laughed. They would have just accepted the limits of physics. But they weren't reasonable. They were unreasonable. They refused to quit. And because of that, they literally bent the world to their will.
And really, this story just makes you wonder, right? What are the unreasonable ideas out there today that people are laughing at? What's going to be the next 30-year struggle that seems completely impossible right now but will end up changing everything? That's really the question this incredible machine leaves us with.